What, you want me to do that all over again then? I'll call this meeting to order. If you are able, please rise for the national anthem. Okay, Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum and delegation items.
Joe Nichols will not be delegating tonight. His delegation will be moved to a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mover and a seconder for confirmation of the agenda. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Beauregard, any questions? All those in favor? It's carried. Disclosures of interest for tonight's meeting. Adoption of minutes, the one set of minutes, regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 12-19, held on April the 8th, 2019. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bruno, questions? All in favor? That's carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Bodnar.
Number 8, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Bruno.
Items 3 and 4.
Councillor Bagu.
Items 5 and 12.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Wells.
Item 2.
Okay, seeing no others. Yeah. Approval of items not requiring separate discussion. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Bagu. Questions? All in favor? It's carried. We have 3 presentations this evening. Our first presentation is Nancy Salvage and Jane Nye of the Fair Trade Committee regarding the celebrations planned for the city's 10th anniversary as a fair trade city. Ladies, come on up. Just press the red button on the microphone there. There you go.
Good evening, Mayor Steele and councillors, city councillors, Barbara Butters, good evening to you, and also to Councillor Desmarais, who is now on our committee, and we're so grateful. So, my name is Jane Nye, and this is Nancy Salvage, and we are representing the Fair Trade Town Committee this evening. So we're back after just a few weeks, and we want to invite you to our Fair Trade Town 10-year celebration, which is happening on May the 10th on your steps, we hope, where we hope to raise a flag We will serve fair trade coffee and tea and chocolate cake, and have musicians from McKay, and kick off our fair trade crawl, which will happen throughout the next week, where people will pick up a passport and visit all our fair trade partners in town, of which we have quite a number. What we would love is if the councillors would come and serve coffee and cake at our event, and we trust, Mayor Steele, that you will be there as well. So that is at 10 a.m. on the Friday morning, a market morning. Can we count on you?
As long as the schedule calls, certainly. And great for technology here. Let's take a quick peek. May the 10th.
A Friday morning?
Yep, no problem. I'm on 610 CKTV between 5 and 9 a.m. So I'll be here.
And councillors, will you be there?
If you're able, that'd be wonderful.
If you're able?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's all we have tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks.
Okay. So next up is Mark Butler. Mark is doing our strategic planning process, which is in a couple weeks. He'll be giving us a bit of an overview, councillors.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, Councillor, Regional Council Butters. I'm glad you guys went first. I would have missed that one. Scott and Amber, good to see you. Yes, on the evening of May the 6th and May 7th, we will be doing a strategic planning session. And I guess I should say a little bit about myself. I will be the lead facilitator for the session. I actually am from Port Colborne. My first 19 years were spent here. Then I went away. I spent 40 years in public service in Newfoundland, of all places. Worked with all 3 levels of government. Great spot, Newfoundland, yeah. Yes, and throughout the course of my career, I've had many opportunities to work on strategic planning and the facilitation skills to go along with that. So about 6 months ago, I had the opportunity to talk to Bill. I think it was at the Italian Hall for their spaghetti supper. And I made the offer of if Bill wanted any help, I'm here. I'm willing to volunteer. I'm one of those, what they call a Zoomer. Does anybody know what a Zoomer is? A Zoomer is a newly retired person who has some income, I won't say how much, and is prepared to volunteer. I'm still pretty active, and I want to be active in the community, so I offered that service. The other interesting part of this planning session, today I met with 6 young public servants of the city of Port Colborne, who will become my assistant facilitators throughout the session. So they will have an opportunity to meet with you, present, and work on some of their own facilitation skills. What's going to happen? There's going to be 40 of us there. It's going to be a big group. Councillors. We'll also be inviting city directors who I met with last week and the managers. I guess there's about 15 or 20 of them. So it's a good-sized group. I understand that we haven't done a strategic planning session, a formal session, in a long time. I think Mayor Bodner was there when we had the last formal strategic planning session, and that was done in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the reasons I think that's important why we're doing this is there's been a number of activities lately around planning. We've had a library plan. The plan on Parks and Recreation is about to come out, arts and culture. And we really haven't had an umbrella plan that helps us guide some of these plans. I think we will not have a strategic plan by the end of this session, but we will have a framework for a strategic plan. And the key thing here for that period of time is to get it. We need to do a visioning exercise and come up with a vision for where we want to be 10 years from now in Port Colborne. So we will march along through that session. We're going to have some fun. We'll have some facilitated sessions. I understand we're going to have supper beforehand, so that's good. It's not good for me as a facilitator, but it's good for you guys, for sure. So that's pretty much how it's going to go. And hopefully at the end of that session, we'll have a good framework in place. and Mayor Steele will be able to look at our way forward over the next few months to develop that plan in a more formal manner. I'm not sure, did you want to have any comment? This was your ideas as well as mine.
Well, actually.
You got me into this.
That's right, and I do appreciate it. We appreciate it. It's actually a combination of senior staff, Mark and myself, through the mayor's office, but as well as bringing on board our young employees. Some of those employees are going through the in-house leadership program that Scott is operating on a monthly basis. And we want to get them interested because they are the people of the future. So they should have a hand in this also. At the end of the day, by the time we put our plan in order, a lot of us may not even be here in those days that we're looking out to, but at least it sets a framework for us to move forward as a city. So these are the first of many strategic planning sessions, but we have to get that framework in order to go forward. So there'll be lots coming out of this. So we do appreciate it, Mark. Any questions to Mark today? Or you can save them for May the 7th and 8th.
So I have one last comment on behalf of my group today. They were excited and also a little bit nervous. And I said, don't worry, they don't bite. They'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll make sure of that too.
All
So,
right.
thank you, Mark.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Okay, next up is our CAO, Scott Louie, regarding the City of Port Colborne's fees and charges structure.
So thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to give a presentation today, and the presentation is actually recycled from about 2 years ago. I gave this presentation to the previous council in the budget in 2017. The reason that I'm back in front of you today is because recently at a council meeting, we reviewed our consolidated fee bylaw for 2019 user fees at the city. And at the time, a couple of things happened. I think we were prepared to answer questions on staff, that is, we're prepared to answer questions on the fees that had changed or were proposed to be changing in the new bylaw, but we weren't super prepared for a deeper dive, some questions about existing fees that were already in the bylaw. But the other reason is to try to get some sense of where council wants us to go. So what I have instructed every department to come one at a time to a council meeting over the next 5 or 6 or 7 council meetings with an individual deeper dive of all of the fees that department charges. But before they do that, I wanted to set the context and talk about some principles around charging user fees. So we do charge user fees. The user fees contribute about $2 million annually to the city budget, and this is an interesting concept. I know the budget can be confusing. I think that sometimes people think that we just raise taxes and then we figure out what to spend the money on. The fact is, we decide at the beginning of the year what services and programs the city wants to provide, council wants to provide, and how much it's going to cost to deliver those services. We also start off with revenues, and that could be provincial grants, the amount of money we're going to take in from user fees, and then the remainder is the amount that we need to go back and calculate the residential, commercial, and industrial tax rate to levy enough money to make up the difference. So that $2 million, if we didn't charge those fees, that would be more taxes that we're going out to the public to ask for. Almost every single department charges user fees. You can imagine ice rentals, fines for library books, dock boat launches and so on at the marina. That does help offset property tax increases insofar as if we didn't collect that money from users of the fees to deliver the programs, that money would have to be levied to help offset the cost of delivering the program. And what user fees does do, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is it puts the cost of a program and service to the person who's benefiting from the program and service. And I have a slide that's more of an image that will help to describe this a little bit more as I go through. So user fees, there's 2 schools of thought. I hear this all the time, I'm sure you do too. People say, it's not fair, I shouldn't have to pay. The guy who did it is already working there, you just have to send him to my house that day. Like the fire inspector, for example, that's a great example. his salary is already paid, his truck is already in the parking spot, ready to go. We already have a photocopier and paper and pens. Why do I have to pay $100 or $200 or $500 for a fire inspection? And that is a school of thought. The other school of thought is when one person or one individual or one neighborhood or one user group uses something, that user should have to pay, and that shouldn't be subsidized by all of the taxpayers in Port Colborne. Obviously, we must have some well, I guess it's not obvious. Realistically, we have to have user fees. I guess we could waive all fees, but I think that would make things inequitable for the residents of the city. So, like I said, we're looking for direction from you. Staff, as they come forward with their individual departments' user fees, want to know from council where you want us to go. There is no user fee policy. I proposed one in 2017. We didn't get there. I think we're going a little bit by feel at the staff level, by our feeling of where council wants us to be. How the fees are calculated, what fees are charged on, and whether or not there's some kind of a subsidy on fees. Because there's no policy, we end up with an inconsistent application of the fees. Some fees, I freely admit, some fees have no basis in reality. Some fees are that way because that's what we used to charge, and we still do. Some fees are a certain amount because that's what they are in other cities and towns. And some fees are very precisely calculated to capture the cost of providing the service to a resident. And that's a good thing, probably, in those cases. The other thing is it's difficult to justify. If we're charging the same amount of money for something for 20 or 30 years, we know that probably we're not charging enough because inflation hasn't kept up, or we've been charging too much for all of those years, if it's still enough today in 2019. So justifying the fee back to the fee payer, the end user, is something that's difficult in the absence of a policy. What a policy would give us is some kind of guidance to staff when we're calculating the fee that we want to charge. A policy would tell staff whether or not there should be a user fee and whether or not that fee should be subsidized by the tax levy. Should we tax people a little bit to offer a service at less than full cost, I guess is a question. And I guess the last thing it would give us is the chance to say back to that person who's complaining about the amount of the fee, that the fee has some kind of basis in reality, that it has some kind of component that told us that it was the right amount to charge to the person rather than a random number. So if we're going to come up with a policy or even some kind of a direction or something that's going to reassure staff, I think we need to have some guiding principles that we agree on in advance. One of them, and I don't know if there's agreement among the public, is that there is a cost to offering services. There is a cost to offering services. So, like I said at the very beginning, you have the argument that the employee already works there, that the vehicle's already part of the fleet, that the pens and paper and computer already exist in the city. But the opposite theory is that person wouldn't work here. That truck would have never been purchased. The pens and paper wouldn't be part of our supply order if the person wasn't working on delivering that one individual service that the public is taking advantage of. The other part about things having a cost that's hard to sort of get our heads around is that assets are depreciating or depleting over their useful life. One of my favorite examples happens to be on council tonight. It's a request for free picnic tables. So we have picnic tables. We charge money for user groups to use them. And from time to time, a charitable user group or a nonprofit user group will come out and say, we're on a shoestring budget, give us the picnic tables for free. Personally, I have no objection to that. But if you set out the idea that a picnic table can only be used a certain amount of times before you need a new picnic table or you need to do a major repair to a picnic table, then there's a cost. The cost might not be very many. Maybe you can use a picnic table 1,000 times before it's unusable anymore. Should we be charging at least 1/1000th of the cost of a picnic table to that user group, or should the taxpayers in Port Colborne be giving away free picnic tables? That's a political decision for council to make. A second principle, services that benefit an individual user should be paid by the user at the full cost of providing the service. So for example, building a garage for your car collection requires a number of inspections by the chief building official. Should we be subsidizing that so that car collector has all of the taxpayers in Port Colborne helping to protect his cars from the elements? Or should the guy who has all the cars be paying the cost of every single visit from the chief building official, every single piece of paper that the chief building official uses to mark up his inspections? Even, I would say, the 3 days a year of training that the chief building official has to take at the Building Officials Association annual training conference. Because you can drill down to a very specific level of detail if you want true full cost recovery. So that's something that I think council has to decide. And of course, the converse of that, services that benefit the entire community should probably be offered at no charge to the users of the service. But I also think there's a sliding scale in between. Some things benefit the community 75% and 25% of user group, or some number, and then the opposite. Maybe they benefit the user more than the general community, but there is some benefit to the community. 2 more principles. Providing a service at less than full cost means the taxpayers helped to pay for the cost. It was subsidized by the tax rate. Cemetery is a good example. We have burials, we sell plots at a cemetery. If a person has a burial on a Saturday, well, hopefully we're at full cost recovery on a cemetery burial. If we bring out a crew on a Saturday and they're being paid at a premium because it's a Saturday, not a Monday to Friday, all of a sudden the cost costs more, the service costs more. However, if we charge a higher fee for Saturday burials, then now it's being offset. It's not being subsidized by the taxpayer. And that council may, in your wisdom, decide that you do want to subsidize some services, and that's okay too. We'll talk about that as we go on. 2 more principles. The one about the assets being used up, I talked about a little bit. In the big picture, should there be some kind of capital cost recovery when services are used? So for example, some cities, not Port Colborne, have an ice rental for X number of dollars per hour, but they also have a building fee, many different names, capital cost, cost recovery, building fee, where you put $3 or $4 or $5 onto a $100 rental, and that 3%, 4%, 5% goes into some kind of a reserve for future repairs to buildings. So that's another way of capturing the true cost of a rental. And this one was really important in 2017 because there was a lot of discussion around when we enter into a service area, are we hurting businesses in Port Colborne? So nobody else is renting ice, but there could be private cemeteries in the municipality. There could be, a good example is that in the marina, we sell goods to boaters. Well, so does some of the boat stores around, so do some of the hardware stores around. So if we're selling a liter of oil, of outboard engine oil, cheaper than a store in Port Colborne, are we undercutting our tax-paying businesses? And I think that's something that council probably doesn't want to do. But I'd be interested, staff would be interested in some direction. So on the next slide, I have the guide. We can talk about, I've already referenced most of what's on the guide. My recommendation is some kind of a policy that will provide clarity and guidance to staff when they're calculating the user fees, the very fee schedules that they'll be bringing before you at these future council meetings. I don't have a draft policy here today. I was kind of more looking for direction on the heading out towards getting a policy. And then the last line is basically what I just said. Council can provide me direction. Do you want me to go out there and sort of seek these draft policies and bring something back in front of you? So this is a summary, working left to right from top to bottom, of what I just described. So you can imagine a scenario where a service should have no fee attached whatsoever. If you think of snow plowing, winter control, snow plowing is for everyone. Snow plowing is for pedestrians and drivers. It's for visitors and locals. It's for businesses and households. And there's no way that there should be a fee for snow plowing on roads. So obviously, in the center column, you can see that because it benefits the community in the left column, it's 100% supported by the tax levy. The other extreme is when something benefits only one individual homeowner or one individual user. Launching your boat doesn't help me at all. So, having a dock at the marina doesn't help anyone other than the boater. I guess an argument could be made, there's kind of a thin line. The more people who are at the marina, the more shopping is taking place downtown. But generally, you would say that there's one benefiting party from the boat slip rental. And then it gets a little bit, more of the sliding scale in between. So responding to accidents, we do charge a fee for the fire department coming onto a provincial highway to respond to an accident. A lot of people don't know that unless they've had an accident or know somebody who did. And what is the reason why? Because one person is benefiting, usually the traveler, and usually it's paid for by their car insurance, for the response. But it's mostly taxes. Tax money bought the fire truck, tax money trained the firefighters, built the fire hall, and so on. But there's a small user fee, I would suggest, associated with the emergency response. ICE rentals and other community services like the library are services that have a community benefit. I would say literacy in the community and a place for children to go and schools to go and people to get access to materials without having to buy them inside the library benefits the entire community, even though not every single person is a library user. ICE rentals, minor hockey in particular, is subsidized. It's less for an hour of minor hockey than it is for an hour of men's league hockey. And I think the reason is because having something for children to access, sports programs in the city, benefits not just the children playing, but the community at large, healthier, active lifestyles and so on. So you can see that there's, as you work from top 100% subsidized to the bottom 0% subsidized, there's arguments for partial subsidies as you go through. We do have a consolidated fee bylaw now. We did not at the time this presentation was first given, and that's partly how we ended up here today, is because when we brought the consolidated fee bylaw updates to council, there was some confusion. Consolidated, in my opinion, is good because it gives us sort of one-stop shopping for all of our fees. We can put one bylaw on the website for residents to access. We can do updates to them on an annual or every 2 years type basis and let council have a chance to review all of the fees in one shot. And the individual departments can bring bylaw amendments as a one-off, for example, building fees when they're reviewed, or we can bring them an entire amending bylaw in one shot at the start of the year. We can also time out fee increases so that they coincide with, say, a baseball season for baseball fields. So rather than changing fees after registration for those associations have gone out and changing the cost to the providers of the memberships, we can do it on a per season basis, which is easier for them to administer. You can review individual fees as a council, and it can cover multiple years, and we can use some kind of an increase factor, for example, just the CPI or some other type of calculation where we're going to bump fees up gradually to keep up with inflation. The only thing that I didn't put in there that I would say is full cost recovery is a concept. And like I said, you can do a very deep dive into full cost recovery. So full cost recovery is the variable and fixed cost of providing a service. And what that gets into is, like I said, deep dive, I can calculate on a building permit how much time the Human Resources Department spends per year on building services and take a fraction of their expenses as a department and put it into the cost of a building permit. Sometimes it has to be done based on estimates. So minor variances, planning applications, and so on, we try to have a very good handle on the cost of doing them, but it's partly based on whether we're going to do 100 or 110 or 90 during a year. So if we do less, the fixed cost is spread among fewer applications, and sometimes we maybe miss the mark with our estimating, but maybe the next year it will go the other way. So we can go to a very good level of detail. And then again, fixed cost and variable cost is a concept that some people, it can be troubling for some people because you see the fixed cost, and particularly in water, for example, water bills, some people don't understand, why should I have to pay more for fixed costs than I do for my water usage? Well, there are things that don't go away, like the city's insurance policy, the buildings that we need to provide the services, vehicles and so on. The cost of the water is variable, absolutely, and the cost of some of the inputs to selling water, and obviously we're not talking about water and wastewater here, but it makes sense to break out the fixed and variable component for the public to see. So that's basically my presentation. You're gonna see the museum's fees this month, you're gonna see the library's fees next month, and then in no particular order, engineering, planning, recreation, community economic development, and corporate services. We have many, many, many fees, everything from wedding licenses to hall rentals to a beer at Roselawn at intermission of a play. And they're all in this consolidated fee bylaw, and there's some rationale behind most of those fees. But like I said, sometimes it's, we checked with all the other municipalities and we're in the middle, which isn't necessarily based on the cost of providing a service. So I'm more than willing to answer questions, or you could ask questions as they come along in the months to come, as the other presenters come forward.
Great, thank you, Scott. Any questions? Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Louis. You said that you asked council for some guidance regarding a potential policy framework to maybe go off of.
Right.
I would like to see some form of policies or a variety of policies from maybe other municipalities that fall in between those two spectrums that you mentioned, those that benefit all and those that benefit a few.
Right.
And maybe find some of the strengths and weaknesses of those policies and bring them to council, supported by some empirical evidence, if possible. That's what I would like to see.
So through your worship, Councillor Beauregard, what I can do is maybe through the clerk's office or through some of the associations that the city is a member of, request that those policies get emailed to staff here for us to check out and maybe summarize for council.
Yeah, correct. What we'll do after we take some questions, I think we need to formalize a motion that we'll have a mover and a seconder, so we can have staff do this. Is that all right? Okay, Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I'm really encouraged to hear this process, Scott. In terms of setting that policy, fundamentally, if it doesn't need to be set right away since we've set our fees, I'd love to hear from each one of those departments that are setting fees, and I think perhaps you're on to something that may be the first year of every new council, that they get that one-on-one with each fee-setting department to understand the background, their report, and their suggestions. I'm all about thinking that, this isn't a one-size-fits-all, and the department heads and their staff, and particularly their frontline people, they know the nuances of those fees. They know what happens at the counter, they know the complaint they get, they know what might not be rational, but we're doing it anyways because we imply an inflation factor. So I'd like to drill down on each department presenting that first and the nuances, just in listening to you. I mean, some could have an inflation component, some are market-driven, planning fees, some are market-driven, the marina, whereas others are, construction cost allowance, not just inflation.
Right.
So because you have all those things, and lastly, I think it's really important to not just get this blob of 3 pages of fees in December and pass them en masse, and maybe they can still be passed en masse, but at least have each silo come forward and give their rationale. Because I'm just really concerned that, just one of your examples, I can't imagine charging something that people can't control the timing of, if we're digging the grave on a Saturday or digging the grave on a Tuesday. That's one of those ones where you can't just apply a metric to it. You've got to look at the individual nuances to it. So I'm really excited that you're doing this. I've never seen it done before this way, but at least to get this first round, I just don't want to tie the department heads and their staff and their counter people to a policy without hearing what they think policies should be in their given area. So I don't know if that can be incorporated into how we do this. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Counselor. Questions? Counselor?
Mayor, through you to Scott. Scott, is there any regulation that says we can't charge more than what the cost of providing the service is? Like, are we, I won't say handicapped, but I think the right thing is not to charge more than what, what it costs us to do it. But is there an actual regulation that says that?
Right, so through your worship to Councillor Bodner, I would say I know of no regulation that prevents us or handcuffs us from charging a premium for a service. In fact, in some areas, it has been done historically to set up a reserve of some kind. So something costs $50, but you want to eventually have $10,000 in reserve so you charge $60 until you build that $10,000 reserve, except for building services, and that's building permits. For many, many years in Ontario, municipalities were treating this as a revenue center rather than an operating center or a cost center, and actually making a profit and socking that or using that money to offset property taxes, really. And in 2005, the province with Bill 124 locked that down. So you cannot make a profit on building permits. What you can do is charge a little bit extra in some years. I don't want to say a premium, but I guess more than the true cost to balance out increases, so that if the average permit was $125, you could charge $135 for many years. As the cost goes up to $135 and goes to $140 and $145, you're still charging $125 and using a reserve to stabilize the cost of a building permit. But you cannot make a profit in building permits. Everything else, as far as I know, just racking my brain, everything else is fair game.
Okay, Counselor?
But, sorry, through your worship to Councillor Bodner, I would suggest if we are in competition against commercial or industrial providers in the city, that we don't want to, number one, charge a premium, or number two, undercut them, lose money at a service to take business away from tax-paying individuals and businesses in the city.
Thank you, Scott. And as you know, Councillor Bodner, in the past, specifically on private sewer and water systems within the urban area, for us to do it's always been higher than if you hired a private enterprise. Because that, as you sat here, you know why. So with that, if I could get a mover and a seconder so that we can allow staff to move forward with the formulation of a City of Port Colborne fees and charges structure, and to work in conjunction with each department as they present to council, which will allow council to provide input as the process moves forward. Councillor Desmarais, you move that. Councillor Bagu, any questions to that? You got that? I got it written here, so we do that. All right, that's okay with it? Everything? Okay? No, oh, sorry, Councillor?
Through you, Mayor, to maybe Mr. Louis. In regards to this, the motion, can we have the motion set so it's to a cost recovery point, not to exceed a cost recovery point?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion as we go along. I think we need to hear from every department. Because some departments, that's what you may want. Some may be based on what the CAO has said tonight. You may want a higher fee because you need to build up a reserve for a reason. But I think we should leave it where, as we move along, we keep throwing our input in as we hear each department coming forward. Is that all right? I don't think we should not look at that, but I don't think we want to tie it to that right now. If that's okay. All right. Councillors? No more questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have a delegation tonight, so we'll go right into the mayor's report. We held our annual Easter extravaganza on Saturday at the Valley Health and Wellness Center, and this was a huge success. I wandered through both the main floor and our upper floor around the track and the Golden Puck Room. Lots and lots of kids and adults and everybody having lots of fun. And the lady from the Polka Dot Door was there, who I remember watching when my kids were little. She had the Easter Bunny with her, and Like a lot of times, the majority of kids were laughing and giggling, but they had that odd child that would cry when the Easter Bunny held them. The bunny was cute. While kids collected eggs and our firefighters were collecting food in support of Port Cares at their annual food drive, 505 pounds of food and $3,646.53 were collected. We thank all of our staff and our fire department who made the Easter weekend a success for our community. Coming up this week, we have our Parks and Recreation Master Plan public meeting, which is tomorrow, April the 24th, 6:30 p.m. The consultants will be sharing the results they have collected from staff in the community. That'll be here in the council chambers. If you're interested in becoming a volunteer firefighter, this Saturday is our volunteer firefighter open house from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Come visit and learn more, and if interested, to complete an application at the fire department. And lastly, on Tuesday, May the 14th, Port Colborne Fire and Emergency Services will be heading to homes in Port Colborne for Test It Tuesday, in an effort to ensure every Port Colborne home has working smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Residents are encouraged to participate by testing their alarms. Firefighters will be visiting neighborhoods across Port Colborne on Tuesday, May 14th, assisting residents with alarm testing and installing working alarms if the homes do not comply. And the fire chief and I also want to remind residents and watch the video. Test It Tuesday, make sure your smoke alarms are working. They save lives. That's great. Thanks, Michelle. Good job. Chief looks good. Any questions with regards to the mayor's report? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Butters for our regional councillors report.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. Glad to be here as always and glad to see everybody. Hope everybody had a happy Easter. I know I did. So some surprising things happened in the past week at the region. We thought that provincial news coming from the Ontario government was really not going to do anything with public health and Niagara Emergency Medical Services, but come to find out that there are going to be some big changes coming down the pike. The thing is, we don't know what those changes are going to be, other than that they're going to reduce the number of public health agencies down to 10, along with emergency services. What that's going to look like, we don't know. So going forward, our staff at the region are carrying on business as usual. They're doing their jobs. They're acting in a professional manner as we would expect them to. And everybody is waiting to hear what happens next in terms of that. The other somewhat contentious issue that has been percolating up there is whether or not to spend up to $4 million on a barrier on a certain structure in St. Catharines to prevent deaths by suicide. It came before the Public Works and the Public Health Standing Committees this past week, and both those committees voted in favor of moving forward with doing that, and that will come to the Regional Council meeting on Thursday night. If that passes there, I would expect that that will be the first step of many that we must do to deal with some pretty serious mental health issues. And certainly suicides in Niagara. So just as a heads up, on May 2nd, there's a committee of the whole meeting that's going to deal strictly with the airports in Niagara, which Niagara Central, Dorothy Rungling, which is the one Port Colborne contributes to, along with Wayne Fleet, Pelham and Welland, and Niagara District, which is in the north end. So for Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bodnar, I don't know if you can make it there that day, but I know Chair Leo Van Vliet is aware of it because him and I have spoken on a number of occasions, and keeping him updated on that. And that's all that I have for right now. Oh, we have a strat planning session coming up on this Saturday, May, I want to say 11th, at the region as well. I think it's the 11th. So anybody that's interested in that aspect, you've got that info. So if there are any questions, happy to take them and take them back and do what I can. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And I know Councillor Bruno is going to be representing the city at that airport meeting. He informed me today he'll be going. I'm not sure if Councillor Bodnar will be there or not. Okay, thank you. Well, at least we do have somebody, I think. That's fine. Any questions to the councillor? Seeing none? Thanks, Barb. Councillors' items, issues or inquiries? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to take a moment to remind everyone that Ward 2 has a meet and greet this weekend. Councillor Beauregard and myself will be receiving residents of Ward 2 at the Valley Health and Wellness Center in the Golden Puck Community Room from 1 till 3. And it will be an open forum where we would love to hear your questions and do our best to answer them for you. Also, it's a great time to share your concerns or give us suggestions. So we look forward to meeting everyone, and invitation is extended to both the mayor and the regional councillor to join us on that day. And if there are any questions to either of you, that would be a wonderful time for you to be able to answer it. So that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I may be in Ottawa on the weekend, so I'll let you know. Trying to book some appointments up there. Councillor Walls?
Two issues that I'd like to bring forward. The first one is that Ward 4 will have its meeting on Sunday, April the 28th, between 1 and 3 at the Shirkson Community Center, and everybody is welcome to attend. The second issue was one that I just want to bring to council's attention. I have been working with Sherry in regards to a issue concerning explosive targets. The material is called a tannerite. It's commonly available through Cabela's, Bass Pro, Erie Trackers. It's used for sighting of high-powered rifles, and we're working at incorporating that into the firearm discharge bylaw and the noise bylaw. It's used, as I said, for sighting in high-powered rifles at a long distance, and it's sold up to 1 kilogram compounds. It's mixture that you put as a target, you shoot it, and it explodes. 2.5 kilograms of that material can blow up a car. So we need to take some special cautions to that, so we want to make sure that we incorporate that into the safe discharge of our firearms. So those are things that I'm working with Sherry on that have been brought to our attention by a number of Ward 4 councillors that heard explosions, didn't know what they were, inquired into it, and the investigation led to what they were. Again, it's a practice of hunters, normally before hunting season, and so we just want to make sure that that's incorporated into our bylaws. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggett? Councillor Baggett, you have to move your...
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two issues. Councillor Clear and I are planning our open house. We're talking about it, and we just need something that's really big. Maybe. So, not that there's problems. It's because we're so popular at Ward 1, that's all. The real issue is the truck parking on the corner of Catherine and Clarence here. We've had that problem for years. I talked to Mr. Lee about it and sort of remedy it. It seems like when we put the lines on there for parking, people look at the lines and they figure they can park there, but the sign says it's for truck parking unloading only, where the one by your JB Fashions, that's a commercial, on King Street, there is no lines there for the actual truck parking, so people don't park there where the truck's unloading. So I'm just wondering if Mr. Lee could meet us there, talk to a couple business owners and hopefully straighten this out a little bit so we can remedy the situation. It seems like the no parking there, our enforcement hasn't been up to par, I guess you would call it. I don't know how many tickets they've issued or even warnings, but I think this is the next step anyways, without giving tickets and stuff like that. I'd rather not give tickets, but, so.
Okay, Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. I'll have staff set up appointment with the two business locations in particular, and we'll also touch base with Bylaw to see what the current bylaw states and the restrictions and the circumstances behind that. And if there are any modifications, we can deal with those at that point.
Great, thanks. Is that good, Councillor? Good. Councillor Bruno, anything? No, Councillor Beauregard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee, I'd like to thank you and your staff, in particular Mr. Richard Daniel, anyone else that worked with him to put up the blind person awareness sign on Kalali Street. So, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch, anything? You're okay, Ron? Oh, I know, Donna, you said that. Ron, you're all right? Okay, good. Staff, any responses on any previous issue? No? Great. Okay, items requiring separate discussion. We have item number 1, Councillor Beauregard.
Museum Report 2019-60, subject Museum Annual Report, rates and fees, and 2019 schedule of events.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Wells. We have a presentation by Stephanie Powell-Baswick, who is our curator of our museum. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Through your worship to council, Regional Councilor Barbara Butters, nice to see you as well. Thank you for the opportunity to come here today. I did make notes because I can be very passionate and long-winded about the museum and the wonderful programs it has, so I will stick to my agenda. I'm here to talk to you not only about our annual report, but the user fees and also our upcoming events in 2019. 2018, we were lucky enough to have strategic planning through the Scott Louis CAO's direction, and we hit the ground running in terms of having our objectives, our vision, and our motto. So I'm going to read you our vision, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I feel the museum is meeting those. We envision a museum that serves our community and preserves the history and marine heritage of Port Colborne in Humberston. So as you can see from our annual report, we had a record-breaking attendance. We had 19,214 visitors that were counted visitors. So that's not counting those who may be going through the grounds, using the park, doing wedding shots after we're closed, that kind of thing. And we're pretty impressed that that's more than the population of Port Colborne. So we feel that that is telling us that we are meeting some success. More people have been able to enjoy the Heritage Research Archives, our programs and events, as well as Arabella's tea rooms, our off-site walking and urban tours, cemetery tours, as well as many of the talks that we've been having at the Eller Wilson Heritage Research Archives. Details on the specific revenues, where you'll find them, are on page 8 and 9. But most of the success of the museum, both past and present, is through our community partnerships. So a dedicated staff, corporate sponsors, individual donors, members, and volunteers, including a very passionate board of management who are active. So I feel that in terms of being a community museum, we do have the heartbeat of our community. Our volunteers are very strong. We're listening to them every day. This is evidenced by some of the celebrations that we did have last year, which included our 40th anniversary of Arabella's Tea Room, which is the longest serving volunteer-run tea room in Canada, as well as the 40th annual Canal Days Festival, which, as we know, started at the museum grounds and continues on within the city as their signature event. So we're very proud of that. We certainly feel that these two goals that we met last year do indicate that we are our motto, which is more than a museum. Now, before I do discuss the rates and fees that you have on your agenda there listed, I wanted to let you know a little bit about how we come at our rates and fees. We do have a board of management, and annually they review these. Staff bring recommendations through both the Museums of Niagara Association, so that's our other museums and libraries and archives, as well as the Ontario Museum Association and their standards. So a lot of the principles which you read in the report are met by the museum through our community museum operating grant standards in terms of research and governance. One of the important things that we talk about with our rates and fees is accessibility. A good example I can discuss here is membership. Our membership committee have discussed whether or not they wanted to increase. We have a low membership rate in terms of seniors and students that are $3, individuals are $5, a family is $10, and then we have a life patron membership as well, which is $100. We did discuss whether we wanted to increase that, gain more revenue, but after we did a study, a business study, we realized that people who are donating $5 are paying $5 for a membership are donating $25 or $45. So we're still getting a $50 check. And that also makes a $3 membership accessible to anyone. So a lot of our fees are very well thought out in terms of what are other departments doing. Another example, when you talk about the L.R. Wilson Heritage Research Archives, Mcdonald Conference Hall rentals, we have both a half day and a full day, so $60 for a half day, $100 for a full day. And one of the things we find is that we don't provide subsidies for anyone. So if a nonprofit group wants to come and do something there, they still have to pay the $60. We recommend either they get a sponsor, which they have done. I remember the Feral Cat group did have something at the L.R. Wilson. They didn't have the money. We said, get someone to sponsor that. So we're trying to keep it so that anyone can afford it for their family, an anniversary, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we're paying the hydro, we're paying the water bill, and it does take staff to make sure the keys and training are done. So I guess what I'm bringing forward here is that in terms of the rates and fees that you'll see at the museum and archives, they're either standard in terms of other services by other organizations, or they're kept at a rate that's accessible so that our community can use it. Anyone in our community can afford. One of the beauties of the generations before me is that they did go to a free admission in terms of the museum entrance. We are an open concept heritage village, as you know, and we do get a lot of donations at the gate, and even during our event, sometimes you have a small admission or admission by donation, and people will come back and give you a $20 bill and say, this was awesome, it was worth it. And so we do keep track of what's happening in terms of that, so that when we sit down as a board, we can talk about what's working, what's not working in terms of our rates and fees. I guess lastly, I just want to touch base on what's happening in 2019. May is Museum Month, so we're starting with 2 brand new exhibits. They're going to be opening May 1st. We are free admission, 12 to 5, so come to 280 King Street, and you'll be able to have a little look at Solid Comfort, which is Tales from Tennessee Avenue, will be one of our feature exhibits. And the second one is Deadly Dust, which is a little bit about the explosion that happened in 1919. We will be having our Pie Social History Fair in May as well. That's the 26th. So if you enjoy pie and tea and coffee, please come out to that. The History Fair will be available as well. Everybody should have got one of my navigators, which has all of my events and exhibits listed on the back. And if you don't, please let me know. And we'll be happy to see all of the council, residents, and visitors. We're very proud to be not only an asset to the people of Port Colborne, but also the visitors of Port Colborne who come to the southern terminus of the Welland Canal. They want to know about the area, they want to know about the history, about the marine heritage, and they get it all at the museum. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Well, just a quick comment, and I'm glad Councillor Danch let it go a little bit, because he's so history-minded. He was actually pulling up a call of Foster Hewitt calling a Ted Kennedy goal from YouTube.
Was that what it was? Wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. I appreciate it. So, any questions to Stephanie? Seeing none. Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
Oh,
much.
sorry. Oh, sorry.
Mine was a comment, not a question.
Well, comments or questions, Counselor?
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Stephanie, I'd like to say just thank you for your presentation and what you do with the board and the board itself. I'm fortunate to sit on it, and the board and yourself put a lot of effort into it, and it really shows. So I'd just like to say thank you and great presentation.
Oh, well, thank you. And on behalf of the board, we do thank council for not only your financial support, but also I see faces here who come and volunteer their time at our events. So you're supporting us financially, you're supporting with your time and your support, and the Board of Management and the staff both really feel supported and loved by all the council.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Oh, Counselor Clayla.
Mine's just another thank you, Stephanie. We do not know how lucky we are. The museum is a gem. I hear about it all the time, no matter where I go. People are talking about you and your programs, and you do an amazing job. I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, thank you. On behalf of all the staff, we're proud to work for the city.
Great. Counselor Baggio.
I don't have a comment, just a question. Usually when we walk through the museum, we find the archives section so interesting, and then all of a sudden it's over. It's over too fast. Like, I know we have lots of great material that people look at. Are there plans in the museum to actually expand the area where the people can see the history of Park Colborne and that, or just in the little bottom section of the house? Like, we need a bigger area.
That's a great question. Our archives, which was built in 2006 in our research room, it replaced a 5-foot by 5-foot research room. So when we got the archives, we were astounded at what we had, but very quickly realized we need even more. One of the ways that we're meeting objectives for researchers is by getting more online. We're doing a lot more indexes, learning indexes, so that when you have a collection, you can have a document to find out what is in that collection, so that we're more efficient with bringing those archives forward. The other thing about the L.R. Wilson Heritage Research Archives is it doesn't have the same season as a museum. It's open all year round. So throughout the winter months, we were offering hours on Fridays as well as Mondays or by appointment. So because people don't stop wanting to do their genealogical research, or even we've had people coming to buy a house trying to learn a little bit about the house, that kind of thing, that is a service that we're providing all year round. And probably going forward, we'd want to increase that. If we could be 12 to 5 daily, just like the museum eventually, that would be ideal.
Okay, good, Counselor. Counselor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Stephanie, great job. Thank you for an organization that I belong to, Niagara Entrepreneur of the Year. Stephanie did a lot of research for our board. We want to get plaques of historical winners out to the municipalities they came from. In many cases, those were pre-1970, so we're not sure, if Willoughby was Niagara Falls or Fort Erie. So she's done all that research with her counterparts, and it's been very helpful for us to disperse those. I wanted to ask you, the question is, do you receive, or do people know, or they can look on your website, where they can bequeath money upon death? Also, are donations to the museum tax deductible?
Yes, very good question. Through our city bylaw, we are able to provide income tax receipt for any donation $20 or more. We do have both a memorial in terms of donations in memory of somebody who's passed away, that there's a plaque and an income tax receipt, as well as a notification. And we also receive bequests. So that information is on the city website under memberships and donations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Counselor Bruno. Not even a question about Christmas puddings either. So,
You gotta stay away from that.
yeah. Okay, councilors. Hey, Counselor Bodnar, we know all about that. All those in favor of the report? That's carried. Okay, item number 2, Counselor Wells.
Community and Economic Development, Parks and Recreation Division Report 2019-57, subject Port Colborne Downtown Cruiser Association 2019 Cruise Nights.
Thank you, Counselor. Can I get a seconder for this? Counselor Desmarais? Counselor Wells, questions?
Yes, I want to support this, but I would like to have the input from the fire department. I know our Chief Cartwright left, but when I read through the presentation, through all the articles, and we're closing off some streets in there, but I didn't see any reference to emergency procedures or how we can provide access to those areas in the event of emergency, whether there was a meeting on safety or anything. So I would just like to see if we could add some sort of a safety component to that night.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Through the planning process with the events section, we do work with the fire department, and you're correct, their comments are not included in this report this evening, but we do provide them with the opportunity to give us some input, and I will make sure that that happens for the cruise nights again this year.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank
you, Councillor. Any other questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 3, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Planning Development Department Planning Division Report number 2019-52, subject sale of part of Kinnear Park.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Councillor Bodner? Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Certainly I'm supportive of this, and we had the other sale, I believe it was sometime last month or the prior month. Through you to Ashley, I'm wondering, only because in the past when, and in particular in light of the Parks and Rec plan, we sold off some property at Humberston Shoe Park, but yet all or part of it was sunk back into the park. So while we were taking away some land, we added like a dozen trees, a planter, playground equipment, that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if we have a policy. I took a walk through Kinnear Park on my way back into town today, and certainly there's some needed re-asphalting of the walkways, as well as probably some other work that could be done there. Perhaps even a new fence segregating the backyards where they'll now be to the park. And I'm just wondering if that money, which I guess would be some $9,000 now, can stay there at the park. So as we're taking some land away, we're also giving back.
Okay, I'll let the CIO answer that.
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, and I would defer to the director if she has anything to say, but I can take this offline, speak to the director of corporate services and see that this money is held in some kind of park reserve and earmarked for future use at the parks. At that time, it could be released by a staff report to council recommending that that those funds be used for asphalt or whatever needs as if and when they become necessary.
Anything to add, Ashley?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comment was going to be that it would be subject to conversation with the treasurer and to council direction. So,
perfect.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, Councillor?
Yes.
Good. Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, that would, if those funds were to go into a reserve, that would be a general reserve, correct, for all parks? Because the master plan may end up changing what we're doing with that particular park. We don't know.
So through your worship to Councillor Demeray, I mean, the city has reserves and reserve funds. Reserve funds usually have defined uses. So for example, when a person buys a plot in the cemetery, some of that money is reserved to be held in perpetuity for maintenance of the cemetery only. Same thing with lots created by consent to sever. Some of that money is held in a parkland dedication that can only be used for parks. The rest of our reserves we put a title on them, so we'll say equipment replacement reserve, or we'll say sidewalk reserve. But really, it's council has discretion. The first ones are non-discretionary, these ones are discretionary. But we would have a reserve that says, like, this reserve is for parks. And while a future council could come in here and use all that money for, you know, tree removal, if the Emerald Ash Borer or anything really, for all intents and purposes, that once it goes into a reserve, it can only be taken out by budget or by staff report, and it would be released by council, really, I guess, for no other way of putting it. Now, whether it's a specific park, that would come at the staff report level. So the director would come back with a report, says we're buying playground equipment or we're laying asphalt and it's in this park, and some of the money's from here and some of the money's from there. Council would have, at that time, a chance to approve it. So now, if we're sitting here and we're trying to find thousands and thousands of dollars to do a job, and somebody says, "Hi, remember there's 5,000 in this account." At that time, council could, because they have discretion, you have discretion, pull the money and use it for that purpose then. So, yes and no.
Okay, Counselor? All right. Any other questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 4, Counselor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Planning Development Department, Planning Division Report Number 2019-55, subject sale of Lot 25, Plan 882, Janet Street.
Thank you. We got a seconder to that. Counselor Demeray. Counselor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Aquilina, when it comes to industrial lands, when we sell them, there is a 2-year time frame that the developer must build, or we can buy back the land. I'm wondering if that is the case with these ad hoc sales of surplus city lands. Would it apply to this, and what is that procedure?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bruno, I'm going to say about 9 years ago, we changed the policy to apply to all city property that is a buildable lot. So then if we actually have it in the sales agreement, it runs on to the sale, that people have 2 years to commence construction. If they don't, the city could then purchase the property back at 75% of the price that was paid.
Counselor?
Does constitute building, getting a building permit or building?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bruno, it actually is the commencement of construction. A building permit that has a life on its own, but we all want to see the actual construction on the property.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Counselor. Counselor Baggett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions here. I know part of the condition of the sale was the adjustment of the manhole cover. And it's my impression, I think, that we're going to be redoing that street with the sewers and water lines. So the cost to be minimal, I would imagine. I just want to know. Okay. And the other question is, the $55,000, I'm assuming that was the appraisal value by independent appraisal according to the bylaw anyways. And does that money also go into a reserve?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bagu, the money, to answer your first question, yes, we receive an opinion of value that tells us the market value of the property. That is the $55,000 that you see in this report. And what we do is when we get the monies received, it goes into a surplus of sales account that then gets passed down to finance. It's in a GL.
Yeah. Thank you, Bishop. I think it's a great idea to sell the lot. I drove by a couple of times, and it's might bring a young family to the city and pay more taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. And purchaser's a reputable builder within the community, so look forward to that. I'm sure many of us have driven by it for years and years, and it's been vacant. So this is good. I have Counselor Dance, then Counselor Borger.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Is that one serviced?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Danch, yes, there are laterals at the lot, both water and sewer.
Okay. Thank you. Counselor Borgard, you're all set? Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, councilors. Item 5, Counselor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report 2019-56, subject proposed development agreements for Lester Schultz Limited, Block 74, Westwood Estates, Phase 2.
Thank you, Counselor. Can I get a seconder to this? Counselor Danch. Counselor Bagu.
Okay. Oh, okay. Just a couple questions. On page 82 of the report, Mr. Mayor states that one of the conditions of the sale is the owner shall submit proof that any lights installed along the wetland boundary will be dark sky compliant or similar and not commit any light trespass onto the feature to the satisfaction of the chief building official. And my question is, that's for the builder. when he sells the two properties adjoining to the so-called wetlands, does that transfer to the owners of that property also? That they cannot put lights on their properties that trespass onto the wetlands?
Dan?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu, the development agreement is registered on title. Whoever the purchaser, the owner of that new lot, has to abide by what the development agreement says.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. My next question is the fencing that has to go on the 3 boundary sides. Who is responsible for the maintenance of the fence, and for how long are they responsible for the maintenance of the fence?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bagu, the owner of the property would be responsible for the maintenance, and if there's any complaint received about the fence being derelict, it would be the responsibility of the homeowner, of the property owner.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the last time I'm going to get up. The future, I see one of the reports, we're going to have the ditch cleaning and that stuff like that going on. For future ditch cleaning in this ditch now, because the landowner has to pay for special trees and special plants and bushes, when the city comes to redo the ditch, dig it out, who's going to pay for all the replacement of all the trees that the developer had to put in to begin with?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor, I may defer to Chris Lee, because ditch cleaning is under engineering and operations. They would be aware of the development agreement and to know exactly where those trees were. They would be made aware of the trees on the property and planted. You got to be sure that those trees aren't actually planted in the actual ditch itself. There's got to be some caution as to where those trees are planted. The development agreement says where they're to be planted.
Chris, anything to add?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bagu. No, not really. The agreement, as Dan states, sets out the conditions, locations, and everything of that nature. And any discrepancies to that would be picked up, I would hope, right at the beginning of the development when they're being planted. So we wouldn't anticipate any encroachment from any tree or us having to encroach on any.
Okay, good, thank you. Councillor? Any other questions? Okay, to be quite honest, Council, this is came out of the Committee of Adjustment, and then the developer with the city and Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and the Niagara region, although it went to LPAT, they were able to stop that, come to an agreement with regards to what was wanted. The unfortunate part about it is it got that far because there were issues with regards to when those organizations got back to the city with what they wanted. It was really at the 11th hour. As I stated previously, Councillor Butters and I spoke to staff at the region so we can come up with a correction on that. And I spoke to our acting CAO at the NPCA, Gail Wood, and there's going to be changes made there. So, you know, we hope that in the future these things come forward a lot sooner, whether it be to council or more specifically to the Committee of Adjustment, that they can either defer something for an evening because of these issues before it gets to an LPAT and people have to spend money. So, but I'm happy that the developer with the NPCA and the region have come to an agreement that's compatible with everybody. So bodes well for these people. With that said, any more questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 8, Councillor Bodner is the mover.
Oops, it just disappeared, hang on. Engineering and Operations, Engineering Division Report 2019-31, subject, Young and Hoff-Wagner Municipal Drains, third reading.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brunel, you'll second that? Sure. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodner?
I just wanted to bring this forward because another drain is being done. Staff is in a position now to be aggressive on these. A lot of things have come forward that, and you're going to see a lot more drains come before us, certainly during this term of council. But I just like new councillors to read through that and have a look and see some of the obstacles that are put before the drains. It's not as easy as just saying we're going to do it. And also look at some of the charges that people pay. This is a significant burden on some people to come up with the cash to do this. Necessary to do, absolutely. But just if you want to get an idea when this comes forward or somebody's talking to you about it, read these reports and just go through them. They're pretty enlightening.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just my thoughts.
Thanks.
Just to add to that, I contacted Alana Vanderveen, our drainage superintendent today, only because we do have a number of drains on the go right now, and I just wanted to confirm that this is the drain I was thinking it was. I'll just read her reply, because my question was, when did this start? Yes, this is the drain that has been going on for a quarter century. Spreed Associates London Limited was appointed on February the 12th, 1990, for the preparation of this report. There was a report provisionally adopted on October the 23rd of 2017 by City Council, which led to an appeal, which was the fourth appeal on this for a delay. The Drainage Tribunal came back with their decision to move ahead, or allow us to move ahead, on February the 27th, 2019. My issue here in asking Alana that, and I'm glad Councillor Bodner, being the ward councillor, brought it up, was the fact that, you know, provincial government today talks about doing things better. This is one area that we need to let the province, they have to do better. This Drainage Act goes back how far, Chris? The rules on it?
The current version is dated 1970, but it was prior to that, back to the 1800s, so it was under a different name.
So, I mean, to have four, to be quite honest, appeals that were really of no consequences as far as it shouldn't get that far. And why it did, because the issue between the first one and the fourth one were literally the same with regards to how they were going to go on a small piece of property in order to get this, which I think is at the top of the drain, to get this thing moving. To me is wrong. I mean, I think the province needs to look at the Drainage Act and allow these things to move a lot quicker. They came out and changed the OMB to the LPAT, which is supposed to make things quicker. That being fairly new, we haven't seen a lot of things come forward yet. So, Chris, if you had anything to add, I mean, only because we need as a council to come forward, and I'll bring something back to you guys by the next meeting with regards to this, because this is a perfect example. A quarter century, 1990. I mean, it is laughable that you're trying to move water for landowners and specifically farmers in Ward 4, and it's taken that long. It just seems utterly ridiculous to me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of council. Staff is of the very same opinion, but we are bound by the legislation. We have to follow step by step. There's a process involved in that. The tribunals are part of that process, along with the Court of Revisions. A number of councillors, I know Councillor Bodner has sat on the Court of Revisions a couple of times now in different drains, and Councillor Butters. It's a long drawn out public process, and it has some very positive things to it. It allows everybody public access and their opinion and their right to appeal. But as you had stated, it can drag on and on and on for a number of years.
Yeah.
That is the frustrating part.
Correct. As I always state, whether you like the rule or not, you got to follow it until you can make change. I think they do need to update this. You know, we have to get drains cleaned and ditches cleaned. I mean, you know, specifically for our farmers, for the most part of this. They're the largest landowner out there. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chris. Chris, are there things that we can do? I remember being on council when different contractors and engineers went out of business. That threw a wrench into things. I happened to be flicking through the dial and saw a council meeting in Welland about 3 months ago, and they were similar, 25 years, but they were at like 500,000 having been spent up to then over all those years. And their biggest problem was, because of all that time lag, there were so many properties that changed owners. New owners didn't know what they were going to be subject to. They threw in appeals. So the whole thing is definitely fraught with all kinds of obstacles. I'm just wondering, is there anything locally when we embark on this that you see we can do? Is there suggestions we should be sending into the province?
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno. What staff has been doing as of late is that we've been networking, I guess would be the best term, with their counterparts in the other municipalities. Specifically with Wainfleet, we have a very tight connection with them. There's a lot of exchange of information, Fort Erie as well. And I know yourself, we've sat in on a couple of meetings now with your counterpart in Fort Erie and their drainage superintendent to try and amalgamate some ideas, some issues, some services even. So at that level, at the local level, we're trying to do everything we can that we can, I guess for lack of terms, manipulate or contain. And the other issue is, as I said before, is we're stuck by the law, and the law is what it is. We can't contravene that. So that being said, any changes to that, I think that would be a long process because of so many years of the Drainage Act being what it is and for how long it's been in and how those other modifications to where it is today have come about. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight, I'm certain of that, but it's not something that can't be changed either.
Okay, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Through your worship to Mr. Lee, part of the drain ends up in the Niagara Falls area, and that is the discharge point of the drain. When we clean up ahead of the discharge point, it creates more water flow for the discharge itself. I know that the city of Niagara Falls has committed to doing their part. Is there any timing issues with regards to that?
Chris?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. Actually, as part of this specific report that's in question right now, the city of Port Colborne is the initiating municipality. So subsequently, all of the work and all of the work being commissioned by the report, including not only what is in Port Colborne, but was also in Niagara Falls, is addressed by the specifics of this report. The culverts, the depth of the channel, the configuration of the channel, the restoration after the fact. So with the city of Port Colborne being the initiating municipality and our drainage engineer, in this case, Spreet Engineering, they will be overseeing that entire project right to its final discharge. So there's a timing process that's been involved in this because of the other agencies, both federally and provincially. We have a very limited time frame that we can get in and work on this specific drain because of species at risk, specifically spotted turtle, things of this nature. So these all generate conditions that we have to follow, and we have the good fortune of being the municipality that initiated it, so we can control the process a little tighter or a little more efficiently. And that's one of the pluses to this particular drain. The fact that it took so many years, as we had said previously, we've almost beaten this to death. It's taken too long. But that being said, now we have to move forward with this, which is why we need the third reading so that we can then go to tender and make this happen as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Councillor? All set? Councillor Bader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a statement. If you're in a drain area, particularly in Ward 4, if you get notice that there's a public meeting on the drain, please try to attend. That's where you get your information. That's where the engineer is there. That's where our staff is there. You know, you can see all the detailed drawings and everything. Sure, staff will help you out after the fact. But if you're there at that meeting and you hear everybody else talking and the engineer saying things, it makes a lot more sense, especially Councilor Bruno alluded to the fact somebody maybe just bought a house. They're from the city. They have no idea what the heck a drain is and why they got to pay. If you're at that meeting and you can talk to the people there, it really makes a big difference. So it's important. The other thing is those committees that Councillor Butters and I sat on, the Committee of Adjustment, and those are important things. We've solved a lot of problems right there at that committee where it doesn't have to go further. So it is really important to have the chance for the people that have some questions. And please, if you have If you think you're gonna go to one of those, talk to our staff, because they can really enlighten you on a lot of things. You can talk maybe a lot better there about your concerns. So there are ways to help you get through those different meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, no more questions. All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 12, Counselor Bagu.
Region of Niagara regarding a memorandum of understanding for the planning function and services between Niagara Region and local area municipalities, PDS 4-2019.
Thank you, Counselor. Seconder this? Counselor Beauregard. Counselor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read through the whole memorandum. It's quite lengthy, about 100 pages. And probably one of the only concern is anything regarding the NPCA. Here, Niagara Region is the regional government is making rules for the NPCA where the regional councilors are on the NPCA. You can make it rules for yourself. And my problem is the NPCA board is still regional councilors and mayors, not mayors, and I have a big problem with that. I know watching the last meeting that the Conservation Authority, that there was some citizen appointees from other municipalities, and maybe they're going to start putting them on the board, replacing the regional politicians, but I don't think it's soon enough.
Counselor, that's really a whole separate issue than what's on the table.
Okay.
Can you stick to the MOU?
All right. So regarding the Niagara Region telling the Conservation Authority what they're going to do, I totally disagree with that, and I will vote against it.
Dan, do you have any information, please? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you just for the opportunity. The whole memorandum of understanding, you got to remember, the NPCA at the time was regulating the regional official plan policies. The Conservation Authority made the determination not to do that any longer. In essence, then, they needed to change the memorandum of understanding. So the region itself is not telling the Conservation Authority what to do. The Conservation Authority bring it to light, and then that was the main reason, one of the main reasons why they need to update the memorandum of understanding.
Thank you for the update. It's the NPCA brought it back to the region, which is the same thing. There's still Niagara regional politicians on the board, so it's no difference.
Beg to differ, Counselor. This was brought forward by staff at the NPCA with regards to they're not of interest anymore with regards to this. So that's why they were removed. They have nothing to do with this anymore. That was their choice, not anything to do with municipalities or the region of Niagara. So this was staff bringing it forward, not the board. All right? This has nothing to do with the board. So it's just that they're no longer an interested party, so they asked to be removed. So that's why it's being updated. So now it's where it should be, between just the region and the municipalities, because they're the only two interested parties in the planning portion. Yeah, because the NPCA does have planning issues, but no longer with regards to this. That was, I can't remember how long ago it was taken out. I think it's been how long? About two years ago. Yeah, it's been a couple of years, Counselor. So that's why it's come back. There are some other changes. We'll have Dan come forward in an upcoming meeting with an overview for us if you want. But yeah, this is just more of a house cleaning item than anything. Okay? Any more questions? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll bring you back, Dan, with just to give us an overview. We'll figure out a meeting where, as a presentation, okay?
I can do that at the next meeting, Mr. Mayor, under items for consideration or things that have been brought up, and I'll report back to council what the changes are.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll work with the clerk and the CAO on that. Good. Thank you. Okay, notices of motion. Counselor Clayla.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have two notices I'd like to bring forward tonight. My first one is I'd like to make a notice of motion regarding West Street becoming a one-way street as a pilot project. Hopefully by July the 1st, if we can get things finished and prepared by then. I'm hoping that I've been advised that that staff has done previous reports, and I'm hoping that maybe there's some of that already still around that we could look at the next meeting and go from there. And my second one was, I know that we've talked about this, and I'm bringing it forward just because I feel very strongly about it, that we need to have that teachable moment. But I'd like to make a notice of motion regarding adding an advisory traffic pylon to the pedestrian crossover at the intersection of Clarence and Catherine Street in order to augment public safety and awareness. And again, I know that it's been spoken about, but I just feel very, very strongly that we need to educate the public. It's something new, and I'm hoping, if that's not the answer, maybe someone else has a better answer, and I'm open to anything that we can do. So if we could talk about it at next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm putting forward a notice of motion. I will bring a motion forward on May 13th with regards to the Port Colborne Quarry site alteration permit.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Danch. Councillor Wells. All in favor? That's carried. We're now moving into the Committee of the Whole meeting. I'll call this to order. Introduction of addendum items. Madam Clerk.
There are no addendum items this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Confirmation of agenda. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest. Seeing none. Adoption of minutes. We have the special meeting of Council 09-19 held on April the 8th, 2019, and regular meeting of Council 10-19 held on April the 8th, 2019. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Beauregard. Questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Any items to be brought forward? Approval of all the rest of the items? Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Danch. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Proclamations. We have 3 proclamations. We have Doctor's Day on May the 1st, 2019. Emergency Preparedness Week, May 5th to 11th, 2019. And May is Museum Month. A mover and a seconder for those proclamations. Councillor Wells, Councillor Demeray. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. I'll do these in block. Minutes of the Port Colborne Downtown Business Improvement Area Board of Management meetings of December 2017, January 8, 2018, March 12, 2018, April 6, 2018, May 14, 2018. Minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of March the 5th, 2019. And we have the minutes of the Grant Policy Committee meeting of July the 30th, 2018. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Clayliff. Any questions on those? All those in favor? That's carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
We have a number of bylaws this evening. 6669-33-19, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy clerk, commissioner for taking affidavits. 6670-34-19, another bylaw to appoint a deputy clerk, commissioner for taking affidavits. 6671-35-19, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6638-02-19, being a bylaw to establish fees and charges for various services and to repeal and or amend various bylaws. 6672-36-19, being a bylaw to temporarily close sections of various streets to vehicular traffic for the purpose of the Port Colborne Downtown Cruise Nights. 6673-37-19, being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with Joni Rebecca King respecting part of Block O, Plan 775, being Part 2 on Plan 59R-16309. Bylaw 6674-38-19, being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with Cosmo Homes Incorporated respecting Lot 25, Plan 882, Janet Street. Bylaw 6675-39-19, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a development agreement with Lester Schultz Limited regarding Block 74 Westwood Estates. 6676-40-19, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 6646-16, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a subdivision agreement with Lester Schultz Limited, Westwood Estates Phase 2, with a revised grade control plan. 6677-41-19, being a bylaw to approve for a Section 78 engineer's report for drainage works in the city of Port Colborne in the regional municipality of Niagara, known as the Young and Hoff-Wegner Municipal Drain. And lastly, 6678-42-19, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the corporation of the city of Port Colborne at its regular meeting on April 23rd, 2019.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Bodnar, any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Council in closed session. Motion to go into closed session. The council now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Minutes of the closed session portion of the following council meeting, March the 25th of 2019. B, a verbal report from Tammy Morton, Human Resources Coordinator, concerning the performance appraisal of the CAO officer pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239, 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Desmarais, any questions? All in favor? Okay. We'll move into closed session.